So thank you so much for joining. I'll go ahead and get started and kind of admit people in as they come. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, and welcome Jeremy, Annapolis, Saybrook, 15, yeah, 24 years is what I'm going to say. My name is Mike. I'm from the Boston area. I am a leader practitioner. So I've been a leader from team leader all the way to C-level and everything in between. Across being a young lieutenant to a manufacturing team leader in a wine business, legal consulting, startup, lean, a little bit of agile. So I've done the job of a leader, but I also went back to school and studied to be an organizational psychologist. I'm a certified executive and team coach. My main focus has been on leadership and team development, and I spent about 6.5 years at Bain & Company leading their digital learning function. So I'm used to figuring out how in the world do you get busy people to learn? On the personal side, I'm a girl dad of 3 teenagers. I'm a runner. I will not say competitive. I'll just say a runner. Welcome, Bob. And I'm curious. I'll keep an eye on the chat. If you just feel free to let me know what brought you here as we get into the content. My purpose in life, I feel like, at least on a professional side, is to inspire leaders to master their craft. So that's what I'm here for. Another girl dad. Fantastic. ×2, ×3. I love it. So the 4 things that I was hoping to share in the 27 minutes that we have together. One is I wanted to share my view of some of the leadership challenges that we're facing in 2024. And this is influenced by clients that I have, customers I've worked with, and then some of the literature that I see about leadership development. I'll share my point of view on, I'd say, a newer approach to leadership development. I know some of you folks in here, especially on the learning tech side, it's not necessarily new for you, but I'll share a point of view and what informed the way I approach building the Leadership Edge. I'll give you a quick overview of the Leadership Edge. Some of it you can read on the website, but I'll show you, sample week agenda, sample session agenda. And then I want to do one activity that you can take away, just so you get a chance to feel, what is this mindset, skill set, be and do? How does that come together, and what might it feel like? So just like a little teaser session. So those are our 4 main topics, and glad to have some girl dads in the house. So I'll start with what I'm seeing for leadership challenges. No doubt hybrid is here to stay. A recent Gallup poll showed that about 53% of all remote capable workers, so people that don't have to go into the front line or definitely don't have to go into the office or the restaurant, are working in some form of hybrid. So we're all used to it, especially through COVID and post-COVID, that there are going to be people in your room. There's going to be people on a Zoom or on a Teams call. So that is here to stay. So that is one of the challenges that leaders are facing. That's still, if you grew up in an in-person environment, that's still a challenge. Macroeconomic conditions continue to change. The last research I saw from Business Insider is that the last round of big layoffs, a lot of it obviously was tech, but 1/3 of them were managers. So it's becoming more challenging in this macroeconomic times to make sure that managers are adding value to the business. And I saw this interesting quote from McKinsey. I actually had to look up the word pinioned. I had never heard that before, but basically getting stretched. So managers or leaders are doing some of the work at the administrative task level because they've lost people. And then they're also working for people that they don't necessarily know how to influence. There are some industries that are really growing, healthcare tech, but the economy is having a big impact on how we approach business as leaders. Obviously, there's no, the only, change, death, and taxes are the only certainties, but a recent Accenture survey said that 88% of 3,500 C-suite executives said the rate of change is going to grow. No surprise there. And the interesting one is how much money well-being is costing. I really didn't know this. I mean, I've heard more about well-being and organizations investing in well-being, but I really didn't know to what extent. So those are some of the challenges that I'm seeing. And I'll just open it up to you to at least make this kind of back and forth. What else are you experiencing that maybe isn't on here that's a challenge for you or for your leaders? And I'll give you a chance to think and write as I tap dance and watch the chat. I think that
Mike,
captures
do you
at
want
least
us
a
to
few points.
answer, or do you want us to chat? Is it
I'd
better
love to
chat?
hear it in chat if you could, just because then everybody has a record of it and they can participate and read at the same time. I'll direct you to chat. When we open up for the larger Q&A, everybody can come off mute if they want, but recruiting and retaining, yep. I wonder if that's a function of macroeconomic or maybe just talent challenges. It seems like on the constant change side, the things that I'm reading are tech, geopolitics, talent, and obviously economy. Tech change collaboration tools, yeah, they're changing all the time. I work with one client, it's Teams, it's Google Meet. It's a little bit all over the place. So if these capture some of the challenges, what's the impact, and what do I hear from leaders? Well, I put some of this on the course webpage. The words that are coming up often, at least in the beginning, are overwhelmed. The word burnout comes out often. I think it's about 40% of managers are indicating that there's some level of burnout, meaning energy depletion, exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, and reduced professional efficacy or effectiveness. And the younger you go, I think 18 to 29, the number is 49. So we may not necessarily be burnout ourselves as leaders, but we're leading people who might be. And managers have a huge impact on employees' mental health. I think it's the same as a spouse or partner. So, if you've ever worked for a toxic boss or a boss where you don't really click, it's not surprising that can have a huge impact on the level of overwhelm that an individual and a leader feels. I hear that I'm distracted all the time. I can't focus. I think almost 85% of people are distracted at work. And those of you who believe in the word notifications, I've rebranded that to interruption for myself. But things bing, things bong, your phone goes off, you're scrolling, all of a sudden you've lost 30 minutes. And even 2/3 of workers are saying they're spending too much time in meetings, on calls. And so there's a constant pull away from our focus. I hear from leaders also that the traditional contract with their employers, where they're going to get trained by their employers, maybe isn't true as much as it used to be. Companies are spending less on training, and almost 60% have reported in a Forbes article that they have no workplace training whatsoever. I think that can be detrimental to somebody's growth in their career, especially at the early leadership stages. And I hear a lot of loneliness too. Some of this is coming off of COVID and people doing more remote work, but leaders are actually reporting that they're twice as likely to feel lonely. And I think men are hit even harder, that they are twice as likely as women to report that they feel very lonely. So there are some challenges, there's impact. So what does this mean as it relates to the skills that leaders need to build? I read in a book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell years ago, that there's this little grid over on the left-hand side where people can work on success dedication, they can work on personal effectiveness, but it's their leadership ability that's going to increase their total area of impact in the organization. And it's the leadership skills that help accelerate your career, help get the business results, and increase your personal effectiveness and balance. So when I started to think about what leaders need, it was often because I was coaching people who didn't have some of the fundamental skills of leadership. And they would often ask me how questions. How do I hold people accountable? How do I deliver feedback? And so I started recording these 5 or 6 minute overviews on different models and different approaches and different mindsets and skill sets. And they were telling me that that was really valuable, when typically executive coaching is pulling the information, the best out of someone. In some cases, they just didn't have some of the skills. So here's some of the mindsets or areas that I'm hearing about from leaders. One is self-awareness is an area where most leaders are leaning into psychometrics. They're not necessarily aware of how they're showing up, how they're being perceived. Lack of awareness of strengths and some negative self-talk that's getting in the way. Unclear on choices, especially when it comes to career. So values are in question. And then there's an area around EQ and how people approach relationships that is really part of this who you are. So the way you walk through the world, whether you have a growth mindset, whether you have a promotion mindset, an inward or outward mindset, those are going to impact how aware you are, how you approach strengths, what your self-talk is. And we as leaders are the instrument. So that's the who you are part that I'm finding that a lot of leaders need a little bit of work on. And then there's some basic skill sets, managing time, managing meetings effectively, developing others, especially around coaching, accountability, delegation, feedback come together, stakeholder management, influence. And those are some of the more skill sets, or what you do as a leader. Those are things that I'm hearing from leaders that I work with in companies that I work with. And then if you think about the need to respond to the accelerated change, we need to figure out how to learn faster. Adaptability is a skill that I hear often about, increasing learning agility, finding a way to learn from peers, because often a peer has just done something. So you need to learn best practices and then apply those best practices on the job. So I'll get over into the leadership edge in a moment, but that's what I'm seeing. And that's what I'm hearing as leaders think about how their career is growing. A little bit more awareness around who you are, more awareness on what you do and some of the basic skill sets, and then a focus on how you learn. So I'm going to ask just for quick reactions to these in chat, if I could. Just which of these feels most pressing? And what do you think is missing if you think about your leadership journey or those that are on your team? We've got a group of very smart people. I'm curious if you think, is this hitting the nail on the head? Are there skill sets or mindsets that you're hearing that people maybe aren't on the board here? Just keep an eye on chat as I hear it coming in. I've got my own private adaptability to change, and especially new tech. Fair. Thank you. Yeah, I discovered that when I started working with a startup and they gave me a Mac, and I discovered how I feel about change. Who you are seems to be a big challenge. Yeah, and it really influences how you walk through the world and how you communicate with leaders. I mean, if you take, for example, if someone has more of a growth mindset or a strength-based mindset, the way they're going to look for opportunities to give feedback and give feedback are going to be different. So there might be a skill per se of using the situation behavior impact model. But if you have a growth mindset, you're going to approach giving feedback to your team differently. Peer learning is key. Thanks, Jeremy, for that point of view. And yeah, it is difficult. It gets lonely at the top, and it's difficult to find those peers that you can learn from. And I think I've seen some companies go after almost reverse mentoring, tech mentors at the junior level and strategy mentoring at the senior level, but fair. So with that, my point of view on the old approach to leadership development versus the new approach is really born out of my days in Lean Six Sigma that told me that waste is bad. And then also my years at Bain working and WilmerHale working with really busy people who don't have a lot of time. The half-life of a learned skill is getting less and less and less every year. So this edX executive survey quote was interesting that, half the skills that exist aren't going to be relevant in 2025. I mean, who knew 2 years ago that we'd be working on prompt engineering and how we integrate with ChatGPT and how we use these different AI features. So old approach, I'll just go through quickly, was it was content heavy. You did psychometrics, you got big, thick books. You had a trainer who was like a sage on the stage who knew leadership development. You had infrequent multi-day events or full-day events. You had a set of core topics. You used individual development plans based on your performance reviews where you were weak, working on weakness areas. A lot of training departments worked on how many training hours we can deliver to people, and coaching was only accessible for executives. That's kind of old approach. Newer approach, and what I've seen more effective, is make sure the content is focused and in context. So the skill of content limiting and making sure you know just the right amount to grab is key. You can Google and get top 10 tips on accountability. You can get top 10 tips on giving feedback. It is no longer a content problem. Facilitator acts more as a guide on the side. And I've found that when you give people too much content, it's almost like they call it the old fire hose approach, where everybody leaves all wet but still thirsty. they're not actually able to consistently practice the skills over time. So there's an element of reinforcement that needs to happen. Adult learners need choice. They want to pick what they can work on, and they want something relevant to their job. They do need to learn from each other rapidly, almost in an apprenticeship style model. So find the person who knows this thing or just did it recently and apply that skill. And then coaching is available for those who want it. And I'm seeing in the industry around coaching more of a democratization of coaching. There's AI tools. There's people buying packages of coaching. There's like laser coaching, and there's all sorts of different approaches. So as I thought about building a leadership development program specifically to work on the skills that people need today using the newer approach, I came up with what I called the Leadership Edge. And just for basic background, the edge for me is not leaping off the cliff. I just want to make that clear. But it's really about bringing out your best, finding that competitive edge, finding that skill edge, and keeping your skills sharp. And so I love this Vonnegut quote. Really, it's about stretching yourself, putting yourself in a position where you have the opportunity for growth and trying things new. So what's this program all about? It's a 10-week program where we have a kickoff, a closeout, and then we have 4 topics that are focused on who you are, the B side of leadership. So we'll get into values and purpose. We'll get into identifying strengths and finding that leader within that's rooted in your origin story. We'll focus a little bit on the shadow side. I'm not a full-on Jungian psychologist, but there are some things that we can integrate with those saboteur voices. We'll look at opening up more self-awareness as a building block of EQ. We'll identify a couple goals to work on the B side, and then use that to assess relationship health. And we'll use a trust equation to look at some of the close relationships. We'll take a break the week of July 4th, and then we'll get into the what you do side. So we'll focus on time and meeting management, especially where the energy is going and how maybe we can reclaim some of the time, especially for our teams. We'll get into flexibility and coaching using the situational leadership and grow models and give some practical applications of that. We'll focus on accountability and feedback. Delegation is in there a bit, but making sure the systems are in place for really solid accountability and performance for ourselves and for our teams. And then we'll bring it back into relationships focused on networks, your personal board, and the stakeholders, especially around some work I saw in the book, Super Connectors. The how you learn part will be pretty simple. 90-minute team calls once a week. There'll be optional pre-work that I'll post in Teams. I'll be available all week for Q&A. I mean, I'm not going to be tied to the Teams experience, but if something comes up during the week, we'll be able to have a discussion that we can comment on and I can add a perspective to. We will have one thing on every Friday, 5 minutes, just to reflect on our Thursday Teams call. I learned that from the Center of Creative Leadership, just a 5-minute reflection. There'll be one personalized topic that in the flexibility and coaching week and the accountability week, each person will do a teach back on. So you get the opportunity to learn a few more skills. So it might be change management, it might be public speaking, negotiation, career development. It's whatever the group's going to decide. And I'll do some one-on-one laser coaching on those topics. I'm shooting for a group of 8. There are a few spots left. I'm heavily discounting the first group because I'll be honest with you, I've done all of these exercises as parts of different leadership development programs, but I've never put it all together in this program. So it's the first run of this particular program, and it'll run to August 8th. Just to give you a sense of the typical week, Monday we'll send the pre-work, Tuesday and Wednesday is open Q&A, workshop on Thursday, 5-minute reflection Friday. So it shouldn't be super heavy, but we will do some skills practice in those workshops, and folks will have the opportunity to apply new skills. I won't go into too much depth, but a workshop, sorry, it's a little small, but 10 minutes to check in, 10 minutes to introduce the topic, 45 minutes of experiential skills practice around situational leadership, grow model, the coaching habit book, and then some teach backs. And then we'll close the session and identify what we can try and apply. And there'll be a bunch of resources that are available to support growth in those areas. So I am going to just pause for a second because I want to give you the opportunity to experience at least a little micro session around accountability. And what I'd love to do is, if you have any questions at all, I'm going to stay on after the 30-minute mark, but I want to take the next like 7 minutes or so to focus specifically on accountability. So I want to slow things down. And I want to invite you to just take a moment and stop thinking about what you have to do next. Stop thinking about whether you're on mute or off mute, and just slow the day down. And I want you to think about something that needs accountability. Just let the thoughts about what's next in your next meeting and questions that you have that I haven't answered yet, just let those go. And think about something that needs accountability. Just close your eyes if you want. Keep them open if that doesn't work for you. But picture in your mind this thing that needs more accountability. Picture it in your mind. Could be a task that you've delegated, something you need to get done, or simply an exercise routine that you'd like to get back to personally. As you picture the situation that needs accountability, see the situation. Feel the details around it, what it is, why it's important, what done might mean for that particular thing, maybe even what's getting in the way. Really consider the situation and the accountability needed around it. And as you consider this thing that needs accountability, I want you just to reflect on the questions I'm about to read out loud relative to this situation that needs accountability. You don't need to see what's on the screen. Just stay with what needs accountability. Is the individual who needs to do this capable? Do they have the skills, capacity, and resources to be successful? Have I made it crystal clear what a good job looks like? How did I involve, communicate, and build commitment for this particular thing? Have I created a safe environment to fail, to learn, to grow? How did we agree on the frequency and method of check-ins? How has the follow-through gone so far? Have I provided enough support? What were the positive or corrective consequences that were set up depending on performance? How did I plan to celebrate when the task is done or adjust course over time? And now, as I finish those questions and your reflection, let's come back to the here and now. We're back to the end of this short webinar on the Leadership Edge. And I just invite you to take a moment to jot down a note or two about where you might be able to increase the accountability of the tasks that you considered. What's something that you could change? Part of adult education is less about teaching people things new. It's slowing things down so they can reflect using the best of tools that we have available and find small tweaks to improve things. As you consider the thing that you want to adjust to increase accountability, I just invite you to notice the self-talk that happened as you considered the questions. Who was the subject of your thoughts? Were they positively or negatively charged? How might those thoughts impact your relationship with that person? And yes, I do know that that person that you had in mind might be you. So I invite you to consider how your self-talk or your mindset influences how you, quote, do accountability. Trying to bring back the do and the be. And if you'd be so inclined, I'd love to see in chat maybe one adjustment that you could make next week to increase your accountability. I appreciate you being willing to give this a try. Big assumption, given I can't see you all. What's one adjustment that you could make to increase accountability on this situation next week? Who will be the brave first one to share their point of view? Have a tool set in mind when approaching accountability. I tried to give a framework, and you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and give me just a second. I'll throw that document in chat if that's helpful. My little cheat sheet. Be clear what a good job looks like. Yep. Increase frequency, consistency of check-ins and meaningful actual outputs. Awesome. Sweet. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So it doesn't take much sometimes to give us a sense of what needs to be adjusted. And it's not necessarily always about teaching this radically new model that somebody could Google. Sometimes it's just about slowing things down, thinking about how you approach a particular task, reminding people of the best practices, and encouraging them to take a step and identify one or two things that they want to put in place the next week, and then continue to do that over time. That's what inspiring leaders to master their craft is all about. I'm going to go ahead in the chat also and just leave the course page if you're interested in the course. And I know that people have a lot going on, so it's about 28 minutes past the hour. I do want to say thank you for attending. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share and just open things up. You can come off mute for any questions that you have. And I'd love to kind of see your faces and continue the conversation, but really happy that you came. And I'm going to be here for another 15, 20 minutes to answer questions. If you have to go, I get it. If not, I'd love to hear what questions you have.